Hey everyone, Georgia here with a special bonus episode. As promised, I'm back in your feed to share some stories in between seasons 1 and 2. And today I'm bringing you a continuation of a thread that we explored throughout season 1, how friends interact in online spaces. Today I'm sharing an interview with Wes Daniels, who has some really rich things to say about how Quakers think about and interface with social media. Wes is an author and a professor at Guilford College, and you may remember hearing from him on our very first episode, Who Are Modern Quakers? I spoke to him again for our episode about online Quaker communities, where we talked about Twitter and Mastodon and Reddit and some other stuff. But we ran out of space to include this interview, so I'm really excited to share portions of it with you today. Wes has really thought about how social media is influencing us. As these platforms commodify users, Wes has become increasingly uneasy with the ethics of participating in social media, and in fact, he suggests that not using them is an act of resistance that Quakers need to consider. Here is our conversation.
I think that there is work for friends to do, at least at the community level, at least at the monthly meeting level, in terms of thinking about what this looks like for us and how do we want to be online as a meeting, and how is it impacting our lives and our children's lives, because it is.
One thing to know about Wes is that he's been in the social media space for some 23 years.
I started a Zanga blog in like 2000, 2001.
He was a pastor at the time, and some of the kids in his youth group were also blogging. Wes stuck with it throughout years of higher education, earning a master's and a PhD, though he's not still blogging on Zanga.
The blog or website became really a place for me to write out what I was working on in school. I really found it a perfect place to practice writing. I mean, there wasn't that many people reading my blog, so it was a place where I could kind of experiment, and mostly, people gave really positive feedback, and out of that, community started to develop.
As this online community of friends grew, Wes was introduced to other branches of Quakerism, finding commonalities that he didn't know existed.
I saw it as a way of where all of these different branches in Quakerism had kind of built up into these silos. Blogs and then social media, in a way, were kind of like flying underneath the silos. It was a way to sort of like burrow connections down underneath all of these sort of blockades, in a way, to relationship.
Some friendships in that community moved offline for Wes, but they also expanded online with the emergence of a then new social network called Twitter. So, when did you join Twitter, and what was the community like there?
It was early, it was still like you were getting SMS updates and, things like that, which is pretty amazing. And it was an extension of blogging, for sure. I mean, it was very much a lot of the same people who had blogs, who were very active online. We all jumped onto Twitter and started interacting with each other there, sharing, posting links to the blogs that we'd written, or blog posts that we'd written, sharing stuff that other people had written, retweeting that, and kind of amplifying each other's messages a little bit more, which was kind of a cool new thing that you could do at the time. And really trying to use Twitter for what I think the original intention was, which was to, microblog and build connections with people.
As we learned on our online Quaker Communities episode, there were friends on Twitter who started looking out for Quaker references. They answered questions about Quaker faith and practice and connected seekers with meetings and other resources.
I think probably in some ways the Quaker tradition lends itself to, as early friends called it, publishers of truth. And then you have something like Twitter come, where that community and that population's already present. And so it didn't take much to make the jump to Twitter, I would say, up until Elon Musk really that it was a pretty robust space.
A lot of Quakers, a lot of people in general, left Twitter in the wake of the Elon Musk takeover, mass layoffs, etc. These were big reasons why Wes also decided to stop using Twitter, now known as X. He'd already left Facebook.
I'd been feeling uncomfortable for quite some time in my participation on Facebook. When I start to think about Facebook as an organization, it doesn't align with any of my commitments. I don't have to be on here. This is not a place that I'm like required to be. And so I just deactivated my account. It did take me time. I mean, I thought about that for 3 years before I did it. Honestly, I haven't missed it for a second. I haven't even thought about it that much, really. I was already kind of a Twitter fan anyways. Not that Twitter was like completely ethical or anything, but I felt like I felt better about the way that it was going for the most part. I realize as I'm saying all of this that it seems a little naive now, but I am somebody who tries to pay attention to those things. I mean, I'm not going to go into all of it, but there are services I just won't use, or I will really try to not use them because I don't like what they stand for or what they're about from a technology standpoint. There's no pure ethical place to stand in capitalism. I know this. Anyways, if I learn of something that is really egregious or something comes to light that I feel like doesn't really match with my own ethical values, commitments, then I start to explore what it means for me to not be on that or not use it.
Wes found that algorithm-based, ad-driven platforms were becoming increasingly unrecognizable from the Facebook and Twitter that he'd signed up for in the early aughts. And that's something I think a lot of us can probably relate with. Personally, I feel that I was sort of lulled into this current era of social media as slowly more and more ads began to take over my Instagram feed. I used to be able to see everything in chronological order. Now I feel like I'm wrestling with the platform to access the posts that I'm actually interested in.
I mean, it's primarily an advertising engine with like the sheen of building community and like microblogging. But the algorithms were getting to be too powerful and too important to the business model. So I started kind of thinking about what does life look like after these things, and it's like, well, I want to build an email list and keep writing, and if these things go away, I'll at least be able to continue to write and connect with folks. So I started to do a newsletter in 2020 as a kind of exit strategy.
Wes left Twitter shortly after Elon began making his controversial changes.
I think with the downfall of Twitter, you lost the beauty of like this really large public square, or at least, ideally. And all of these other platforms are great, and I really like what Mastodon is about, but it just doesn't have the same juice or vibe for me.
But he hasn't deleted his account.
I've been really unsure about deactivating my account because I don't trust that like my data will be deleted, and that really hate to find out in 3 months that my handle got recycled and is being used by someone else. I feel kind of stuck and unsure of like what is the right thing to do, like other than just not use it or limit my use of it. So I don't know what to do about that part.
Okay, that was something I had never considered before, and it gives me the creeps, honestly. Anyway, while we may know what we want to get out of social media, the people who run the platforms have very different goals.
A couple years ago, one of my children was dealing with an eating disorder, and this was right after there was a big sort of tell-all in the news about how Instagram was targeting young girls with weight loss ads and weight loss videos, and like how billions of dollars were being poured into that, data and information about how that was impacting, I think the focus was primarily female identified people. here's something that's harmless. I mean, they're just following friends from school and posting pictures, and I can see the ads but not buy them. That might be true for you and I. That may not be true for a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old. I mean, and I'm not so sure that it doesn't impact me, and it doesn't impact the way that I feel about what I have and what I don't have. And am I posting enough, about the things I care about so that people know what I care about? I mean, there's so many pieces that come into the way that these sites shape identity or put pressure on us as people, and do have an impact. I don't think they're neutral. And I especially don't think they're neutral especially now, because I do think we're kind of post social media. And I think we're sort of like in the era of algorithm based platforms with the sheen of social connection. Those algorithms that are being designed and engineered by actual people are being designed and engineered for a specific purpose. It's not to help you find the most true information and or whatever fits your particular ethical standpoints or whatever. It's to sell you something. It's to make them money. We can kind of bend them now a little bit to get something out of it that we want, but there is a price to pay.
So what should the Quaker response be to what's happening on all of these social media platforms? I asked that question of Wes.
I think that there will always be friends who feel called to be in places that most Quakers don't want to be, maybe shouldn't be, but that doesn't take away from the people who do feel called there. I think both of those things can be true. I can say for myself that I don't feel that way. I feel like my work is not to try to engage with people on Twitter and connect with them and bring them a Quaker voice. I mean, and I know there are people who are doing that, and that's awesome. And I have zero issue with that.
But Wes has gone back to his roots.
Through all of this, I realized, you know what? Actually, blogs are great. I control everything about my blog, and no one's making profit off of my content. Once I publish it, it doesn't become someone else's content. Yeah, so I just really dug back into my blog and started to write there again and build that out, and my newsletter, and realized that that's fine. That's all I need and at this point in my life.
Wes has a suggestion for social media users, one that Quakers will be familiar with: silence. He even teaches a class on it at Guilford College.
It's called The Practice of Silence. It occurred to me that we're struggling as certainly as I would say, younger people coming out of the pandemic, dealing with a lot of anxiety, dealing with a lot of mental health issues. So we have every class, we practice silence, and then we're reading various, some Quaker stuff, some other, things around mindfulness, some things around neuroscience, and basically talking about what does it look like for us to build a capacity for silence. What does it mean for us to kind of exercise that muscle to not be afraid to be bored, to literally just have everything kind of let our minds wander without having input constantly? How could that shape us and help us to be to feel better, to be able to focus better, those kinds of things. So this is sort of the test of the class, and the secret title of the class is Boredom as a Superpower, and sort of thinking about can we get to a place get back to a place where we can kind of shut these things off and be able to be present with ourselves and with one another, with the spirit. And I think being able to do that, especially right now, especially when technology, our devices, the platforms we're on are just like the last thing that any of those things want us to do is set them down and turn them off and be quiet for a minute. And so the ability to actually be able to do that is a practice of resistance. So I think that is, in a way, the answer. These things aren't going to go away. We're not ever going to be able to keep up with what are the ethical choices on all of the things all of the time. And so I think continuing to develop tools and practices that help us resist and be able to like create a little bit of space to see where these things are impacting me personally, my children, my family, my meeting, my community, my students, whoever that is. I think that is, I think that's a direction, the direction that I'm certainly trying to work on for myself.
Thank you for listening to our special bonus episode with Wes Daniels. You can learn more about Wes, find a link to his website and newsletter, and get a transcript of this episode, complete with discussion questions, on our episode page. Find that at QuakerPodcast.com. We'd love to know what you think about Wes's perspective on social media and how you felt led to use or not use social media. Is this a conversation that you've had with your meeting? Let us know in the comments on our episode page. So we are busy working on season 2, and we'd really appreciate your support of the podcast. The Quaker Podcast is part of Thee Quaker Project, a nonprofit media organization dedicated to telling stories of spiritual courage and exploring what it means to be a Quaker in the 21st century. We would love it if you would consider becoming one of our patrons. With $5, $10, $20, or $50 a month, you can help our project become sustainable in the long term. You can go to thequaker.org to learn more about becoming a supporter. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I look forward to being back soon with another mini episode.